Welcome one and all to the ninth year of the Atlanta Radical Book Fair. Of course, we took a couple of years off from an in-person book fair in there, so we haven't done nine of the. Anyway, you don't need to know all that. I just wanted to open up today and welcome you here, and just express on behalf of the Book Fair Collective our deep appreciation to our continued partners, the Auburn Avenue Research Library. This facility that you're in, if you haven't been here before, is very, very important to the intellectual and cultural life of Atlanta, and we love working with them, and we love doing this event every year. And so we thank you, and we want to shout out especially to Ruben, who's done so much this year to make this event go smoothly. So please, round of applause for the Auburn Avenue Library, if you don't mind. As you know, it's a book fair. There's books for sale out front, and you should definitely check that stuff out. But what we're here to learn about today is a report back from our dear comrades to my left here, who have both, one quite recently, one maybe a little less recently, returned from the West Bank with the International Solidarity Movement. Without further ado, I give you Andrew and Rebecca.
So, yeah, thanks again, everybody, for coming. We went to the West Bank with the International Solidarity Movement to provide protective presence for the Palestinians there. Yes, into the mic. Sorry. Yes, thank you again, everybody, for coming. Yes, we volunteered with the International Solidarity Movement this summer, last year, to provide protective presence, solidarity presence with the Palestinians in the West Bank.
So this talk needs to begin with a recognition that it is happening on stolen Muskogee land, and the simultaneous or following legacy of enslavement of Black folks here. To understand this conversation about settler colonialism, we have to begin there with our intimate connection with these kinds of projects. So, settler colonialism is defined at its heart as the displacement through both murder and removal of an indigenous population by settlers as part of a colonial project by imperial powers. And we look up here and we see the resonance between our history and the disappearance of people from this land and the ongoing displacement and murder that is going on in Palestine, a settler colonial project.
Yes, and oh yeah, no, you're good. And yes, very much to underscore that fact that the problem at heart of both American and Israeli settler colonial projects, past and present, is settler colonialism. I wanted to bring up this map here of Palestine over the last 100 years. It's a fairly good representation we see with the advent of the Zionist movement in the late 19th, early 20th centuries, a single continuous landmass of Palestine. Bear in mind, of course, that there were Palestinian Jewish communities in Palestine before the Zionist movement. With the advent of the Zionist movement, we see the chipping away of that continuous landmass. And the UN drafted a partition plan in 1947, which roughly halved the land between the Zionist movement and the Palestinians. However, with the Nakba of 1948, we saw the Zionist militias, roughly about 30 to 35% of the population, move the Palestinians into about 25% of the total land of Palestine. That is the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Then in the Six-Day War of 1967, we see the state of Israel taking over formal control of Gaza and the West Bank, and then, of course, over the next half a century, the gradual chipping away at that continuous landmass, once again through settler colonialism, outposts and settlements in the West Bank, and also in the Gaza Strip. Colonial warfare, that is, in the Gaza Strip as well. So I also wanted to dive into our role as Americans, as residents of Georgia, and as residents of Atlanta in the conflict and in the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, because it's far from a neutral role that we play. Since 1967, the U.S. government has given the Israeli government about $260 billion in military funding, mostly in the form of missiles, munitions, guns, also some economic aid. And in 2024 alone, the U.S. gifted the Israeli military about $17.9 billion. That figure is derived from the public records that the IRS releases each year regarding our federal taxes. Atlanta contributed about $38 million of that, and Georgia as a whole, $452 million of that. Additionally, since 1992, many of you may know that Georgia State University hosts the Georgia International Law Enforcement Exchange Program. This program sends delegations of Georgia and other states' sheriffs and police chiefs to Israel, especially to train in militarized policing tactics. Operation SHIELD in 2017 is largely considered an outgrowth of this. It was a creation of APD's Video Surveillance Center, which is a centralized network of about 20,000 public and private cameras across the city of Atlanta, making it the #1 most surveilled city in the United States. Also, Cop City, of course, begun in 2022, completed this year, is largely considered by activists and researchers to be an outgrowth of this program. And it is largely replicated off of the IOF's own militarized training facility, dubbed Little Gaza, which was built in 2006. But of course, our influence on the region cannot be limited to police and military.
So what is ISM? Well, our principles involve direct action and also protective presence. So that's the functional kind of texture of what it is that we do. But we began in 2001 and then had a resurgence around the Second Intifada. And we are Palestinian-led, which is a central pillar of our kind of framework. And Andrew will go into it more, but I use these pictures, most of which come from the from the Ramallah Flat. We have room from Turtle Island to Palestine. Occupation is a crime, and so this symbolizes Palestinian-led. We have that super messy piece of paper where we were consensus decision-making, and we have the direct action that we see in the protest that is down in the bottom, and we have principles around anti-oppression. And so this is a sticker, "Love is Halal," that I found in a Ramallah bathroom. So this is kind of our legacy. And more on direct action. So what that means is sometimes protests, some of which we might be familiar with here, although the repression is profoundly different in texture. We also are doing things that are protective presence, meaning that we're accompanying school kids on their way to go to classes as part of ensuring that they have a sense of security or a greater sense of security. And we're washing dishes, and we're going up to see the settlers when asked by the families that we're staying with. And we're walking with the shepherds in the middle of nowhere, feeding the goats. Another component of what we do is documentation. And so it's a very important part, some because we try to shine a light on the situation, and some because there are certain families that are interested in pursuing legal cases, even through the courts in 48, and have human rights lawyers with whom they coordinate. So we have a system of making sure that there's documentation of every single time that a settler beats somebody who is living on their own land with their own family. So that's kind of the texture of what it is that we do day to day.
So the ISM also has 4 core principles, the first one being that it is, of course, Palestinian-led, meaning that the ISM's ultimate goal is to support Palestinian popular struggle and to follow the leads of our Palestinian coordinators and host families. The second rule of thumb at the ISM is nonviolence. So the ISM activists abstain from all verbal and physical violence. This is, of course, because the method of nonviolence is very effective against the overwhelming military power of the U.S. and Israel. It also helps the movement to continue its work in the region and better protect the communities that we're there to protect. And again, just underscoring that we are there in Palestine to support and be present for, be mindful of indigenous resistance, not to lead or to prescribe resistance, of course. Thirdly, the ISM is consensus-based. So while it might take a little bit of time and effort, of course, to get everybody on the same page, it's very necessary to make sure that everybody's taking the same risks, making the same decisions together as a group. And to that end, the ISM maintains a buddy system so that nobody goes it alone, of course. Fourthly, the ISM is also anti-oppression. So at the ISM, there's, of course, no tolerance for any discrimination based on religion, ethnicity, race, age, gender, sexuality. This helps ensure that the spaces that we inhabit remain free of bigoted behaviors and structures, both within the organization as we're combating bigoted structures from without. It is also worth noting here, of course, that protest against a military and a state in no way is in the same ballpark as hatred of a religion or ethnicity. And it, of course, is worth bearing in mind that the ISM consists of volunteers, both Jewish and Muslim, the world over. So to dive more into the current situation in the West Bank, in short, it's very, very bad. Since the Oslo Accords of the 1990s, the West Bank has been divided into 3 zones, areas A, B, and C. Area A, which you can see on the map on the lower right-hand side, covers only about 18% of the West Bank. That is fully controlled by the Palestinian Authority. However, the PA has to routinely look the other way as the IOF conducts raids, mass arrests, operations within territory that is ostensibly completely controlled by the Palestinians. Area B is jointly controlled by the PA and the IOF, Israeli occupation forces. And Area C, which is a full 60% of the West Bank, is fully controlled by the IOF. So as the bombing and starvation of Gaza continues, Israeli settlers and soldiers continue to escalate their intimidation and ethnic cleansing within the West Bank as well. You see also a map on the upper right-hand corner of Masfer Yato, which is a collective of 19 hamlets and villages in Area C of the West Bank. And the yellow and red areas are the firing zones and closed military zones, which are the elastic designations that the occupation grants certain areas of Area C in an effort to further demolish homes, separate communities and farmland, and, of course, arrest Palestinians and activists without cause. I wanted to also mention here 2 individuals that have been killed recently. Just over 1 year ago, ISM volunteer Aishnur Ezgi Egi was shot and killed by an IOF sniper while standing unarmed beneath an olive tree outside of the town of Beta. This would have been September of last year. It was right after a nonviolent demonstration, and the demonstration had largely dispersed. It was a very unprovoked attack. Then this summer in Masfer Yatta, Auda Hathaleen, who is a father of 3, a human rights activist, and a consultant on the award-winning documentary No Other Land, he was shot and killed by an Israeli settler, Yinion Levy. And I'll have more on the hunger strike that was undertaken to recover his body from the IOF later. So this is a situation, of course, very ripe for abuse, where police and military do not enforce land laws against settlers who are able to trespass on Palestinian land, oftentimes destroy property, defoliate crops with their sheep and their goats, and oftentimes assault or worse the homeowners, the Palestinian homeowners. You'll see in the pictures on the lower left and upper right-hand sides, that's Sheikh Saeed, a very kind and peaceful religious leader in the community of Masfer Yatta. He was shot in the leg 3 weeks before I arrived in Masfer Yatta, and shot in the leg by a settler rifle. They had to amputate his wound at the knee because the ambulance that was trying to come down the road to his house was blocked by settlers from coming there, so they had to amputate his wound. Again, just underscoring, and the pictures in question actually are of a separate incident where he was assaulted again 2 weeks after I arrived, again, in his own field, again, underlining the constant and routine nature of these attacks. So the ISM is most involved in, most present in the Jordan Valley and Masfer Yatta in West Bank right now. Both regions suffer from constant, again, soldier and settler attacks, and both need near constant volunteer presence for the people to continue, as Masab Rabi told me, a local Palestinian coordinator. He also said that the police, if they come, and they usually don't, they demand land ownership papers from the homeowners, and they maybe tell the settlers to leave. They don't enforce the firing zone laws against the settlers, just Palestinians and activists. So we have some footage here. We won't go through all of it, of course, but just to show a couple of videos. Also, to explain the two photos here, that's footage or photos of an activist's car that was set on fire by the settler movement. The settler or the activist in question was unharmed, and incidentally, the activist in question is also Israeli. Again, emphasizing the fact that it doesn't matter who you are. If you support Palestinian rights, if you support universal human rights, you are considered a target by the settler movement. So to get into some footage, this is some footage from a farm called Han, just in Masferiata. A couple of young settlers were trespassing at the time. Keep in mind, there's a loud, if I can, let's see. There's a loud noise near the beginning of the video. That's just of the Palestinian farmer making a loud noise to try to scare the settlers' sheep out of his groves. So if you hear that noise, because I'm not sure how loud this is going to be. Let's see. Full screen.
Send it to ground chat. Tell the other ones to do it. I think
This led into a confrontation that lasted for about 1 hour between 3:45 p.m. that day and 4:45 p.m. I'll just let the video roll. But essentially, this hour-long confrontation finally ended with the police arriving and telling the settlers to leave. They did for about half an hour, and then they returned again later that afternoon. Just underscoring again, there's just no enforcement of land laws in the West Bank. This is of another settler in Darit, and that was an Italian activist kind of toe-to-toe with him. Oh, this is footage as well of a Palestinian farmer using an innovative, nonviolent, non-contact method to move sheep out of his grove, if you want to see that one more time. He's just banging water bottles together to try to move the settler's sheep out of his groves to stop them from defoliating his olives, essentially. So all this very much paints a very dire portrait, of course, and it may feel at times like an unending losing battle. However, Palestine has some of the most incredible stories of humanity, of solidarity, and of resistance against overwhelming military and vigilante oppression. As referenced earlier, over 60 women of Auda Hathleen's home village, al-Her, led a hunger strike for about 10 days until the IOF agreed to return his body for a decent burial and funeral. And again, in the immediate aftermath of October 7th, settlers attacked and expelled a family from Darit. The family was luckily able to return some weeks later and had to rebuild from terrible devastation that was wrought on their house. And they're able to stay there today with the help of continuous presence from volunteers with movements and organizations like the ISM, Operation Doves, and FASA. FASA is an Arabic colloquialism meaning coming to someone's aid in a time of need, or coming to a friend's aid in a time of need. This is despite Darit being surrounded on about 3 sides, 260, 270 degrees by an Israeli outpost, an Israeli settlement, and also an Israeli-only road that you can see cutting through their property in that photo right there. Meaning that you can only drive on that road if you have a yellow license plate, that is an Israeli license plate. I have circled there also what used to be a Palestinian's well that was taken over in 2023 by the settlers who moved in across the road. That is a settlement greenhouse right next to the well, and they just moved in and took it over. Again, just underscoring the constant incremental annexation of land over the last 50 plus years, 100 years.
So I put separation wall and checkpoints as the title of this slide because separation wall is the word that you might be most familiar with, but I'm going to correct in real time that that's not its name. It's an apartheid wall. And the reason it's called an apartheid wall is because just like in South Africa, it represents an intentional, forcible way to kind of terrorize the native population, the indigenous population, by ensuring that there's no freedom of movement. So you have to have particular papers to pass through this wall. This wall has 2 different lines in every crossing, one line for international car tags and Israeli tags, and another for Palestinian vehicles. For Palestinian taxi drivers, it's a lengthy year-long process to be able to get a permit to drive in certain spaces inside 48. And again, that's the phrasing that I use, 48, instead of calling it Israel, because it's a recognition of the newness of this state and the illegal nature of this state. Also, Andrew used and I use IOF, which stands for Israeli Occupation Force, because there's no such thing as an Israeli Defense Force. That's not what they do. So looking at this image, this is actually an Al Jazeera image. On the right-hand side, we can see how it is not actually controlled by Fatah. It is not a Palestinian Authority area because you cannot move from place to place. There are pictures here of some of the more moderate checkpoints, but be aware that in the same way that you got up today and said, okay, it's 30 minutes to the Auburn Avenue Research Library, so I'm going to get in my car at X time, in the same way that we make those calculations, it's not possible to do that in the West Bank. It is not possible. So if your doctor's appointment is in El Khalil at 8 p.m., then you leave at 8 a.m., even if you're only 10 miles away, because there is a high likelihood that you will not get there at all, that you will be detained at a checkpoint. And also, it's going to take anywhere from 30 minutes to 3 months for you to make that doctor's appointment. And so it's important for us to understand what this does, the implications in people's lived experience, and the way that it's an attempt to terrorize people in order to force them to leave, in order to force them to give up. And of course, the Palestinians have not. I want to tell a few anecdotes about the time that I was there. I was there in the summer of 24. And one of the areas in Masafayata is, it's called Susia. And actually the Israeli settlement that was built nearby also calls itself Susia, so that the signs all point to the settlement instead of to the ancient village of Susia. And the settlers in Susia constantly try to eliminate, to terrorize the actual residents of the original village. So there's a picture of a well there that they intentionally spoiled so that there's no nearby water in the village. You can see the sheep coming along the road on the bottom there, and the blockages so that they can't get through. So you only have the margins of the highway in order to graze your sheep. All of the really good pasture land has been taken by the settlers. And when I say taken, it means that if people come onto that land, shots are fired near them, and goats are sometimes killed, sheep are sometimes killed if they go onto land that has been claimed illegally by the settlers. And so one of the amazing things about the shepherds in Susia is that they have a network on WhatsApp where they inform each other about the movements of the settlers. And when internationals are nearby, they're included in that network, and they come straight to the front, as has been asked, in order to start documentation and form a physical barrier to try to buffer and allow people to get to safety, or relative safety. I have a picture of a garden that some of you may be familiar with from the documentary, No Other Land. This is Hafez's garden, and after October 7th, the people in the nearby settlement, Ma'on, came down en masse and tore every single plant out. It's in the village of Tuwani, and that village has one little grocery store, and it was supplied by Hafez's fresh vegetables and fruits. And that no longer could happen after October 7th. And that actually wasn't the only time. They came back and destroyed it again after Hafez and international partners replanted it. And routinely, there's a little, I show it. There's a little checkpoint or like a outpost that's up at the top of Hafez's garden. And constantly, there are settlers and soldiers in that checkpoint. And they come down into the garden and then say they are being attacked by Hafez or the internationals. The police get called, and Hafez several times has been arrested in his own garden for potential trespass because the land is somehow in dispute according to the settlers and only according to the settlers. He has papers. Also, his guest house is under a current order of demolition, so they can basically say whenever they want, your house isn't yours and we can knock it down anytime. And it is only the continued presence of activists and the strength of the village of Tuwani that has meant that that guest house is still standing. This is an image of Jibrin's olive trees. He had a huge grove of olive trees, and of course the role of olives is central in both the Palestinian economy, but also the culture and the fiber of every single year. So the olive harvest has people coming, all the relatives, all the friends coming out and trying to harvest all at once as quickly as possible so that the settlers don't destroy the trees or prevent your ability to harvest your own orchards. And I'm happy to say that every year international activists come from all over the world to help support the ability of the Palestinian people to harvest their own olives. This is olive harvest season, and this fight is ongoing. I would recommend, with some reservations, an article by The Guardian that came out just a couple days ago about the struggle to actually have an olive harvest, to harvest your own trees. You can see here that sometimes they'll run into trees to knock them over with ATVs, and as Andrew mentioned, one of the ongoing methods of destroying Palestinian livelihood is to bring the settlers bringing their sheep and goats into areas just in the spring to ensure that the unripe olives never come and are never able to be harvested. And so one of the activities that I did when I was there was build a fence. And we built the fence in order to keep the sheep and goats out. It was destroyed in the night, and we built it again. And we will keep building it back as long as Palestine is not free. There was an attack at Shab al-Batam, and it happened in the afternoon. An Israeli settler came in to the paddock where all of the Palestinian families' sheep were, and lifted up a club, like the ones that you saw in the video, and began to beat the owner of the house. Of course, the family called the police, called to get some help, and the end result of this action was not just that the settlers were told to go away, not just that it was ignored, but in fact that the eldest son of the family was arrested and taken away and held for more than 2 weeks. And so calling the police is not just ineffective, it's actually a huge risk. And the reason that some families still decide to do it is because occasionally it has a helpful result, but mostly it's because of documentation purposes, that they want to record and ensure that there is a record of this reign of terror. And here's an image of a home that was demolished, again going back to those orders of demolition. So those can be long-standing to keep you in utter suspense about whether or not your house will be demolished that day. This particular woman, the order for demolition was signed 3 hours before the bulldozers showed up, and she didn't know about it until the people driving the bulldozers handed it to her. So all of her belongings, all of her children's belongings, all of her father's belongings were in that house when it got demolished. that level of chaos and unpredictability is daily life. And again, to point out the vitriolic nature of the settlers and the indoctrination that is required in order to recreate a group of people who could do this. So one of the things that I shouldn't have found shocking, but I did, was the way in which children are taught very carefully and thoroughly to dehumanize the Palestinian population. We see here the guy with the stroller and the rifle. So this is actually one of the people who moved in next to Durit, which Andrew was talking about. And you see here at the bottom, another place in Durit, the settlers walked onto, 5 young men walked onto their porch, and everybody had to flee inside because they had an appropriate expectation of being beaten. Everyone fled inside and tried to barricade themselves inside their home, and the settlers sat on the porch for 2 hours smoking cigarettes and chatting. I want you to imagine that as your porch and what that would feel like. Also, ATVs are used routinely as vehicles for both violence but also intimidation. And you see in the top image a man and his teenage son driving an ATV with an Israeli flag. They incur into the land and then leave it and then incur and leave it and incur and leave it to ensure that there's no feeling of safety and security at any time. But as Andrew said, there is profound and inspiring resistance. And one of the beautiful forms of that resistance is art. Art and stickers, political statements about the resistance to the occupation are everywhere, all over the apartheid wall, all over any structure that is possible to maintain it. We see here an image of "Our revenge will be the laughter of our children." And that is the kind of resilience and determination that the Palestinian people have shown over and over and over again. And I just want to end with a reminder that, another form of resistance through art that I just want to make a recommendation. It's an older documentary, but you should check it out, is Slingshot Hip Hop. So a connection of art, a connection of music, bringing together resistance across the world. And there was a chant that I learned when I was part of the anti-Iraq war movement, I guess the second Iraq war, which is resistance is justified when people are occupied. And I want that to resonate in our minds, right? That as long as there is an occupation in Palestine, there will be resistance. And that resistance can and should be supported by solidarity across the world. So international solidarity. And finally, I'll just say that there's another chant, brick by brick, wall by wall, free the prisoners, free them all. And I want to make a line back to our carceral state, Gilly ensuring that black and brown people in Atlanta are not safe, Cop City, and Tortuguita. It's just important to say that name. So it may feel like a world apart, but it is made of the same fabric, which is a settler colonial project that is deadly to black and brown people.
Thank you, Becca. So with that in mind, of course, if you believe that the movement aligns with your goals or your thoughts, your values, and if you're just curious, we'll have a bit of time to answer some questions afterwards. You can talk to us individually as well. Also, you can consult the ISM's website and social medias, Instagram, just to get an idea of, again, what we do and maybe answer any questions that you might have. And for newcomers, there's, of course, an online bi-monthly orientation as well. I also wanted to highlight, of course, local ways to get involved. Additionally, we have, of course, Georgia State University's own Young Democratic Socialists, YDSA, and they're leading an End Gilly campaign to attempt to bring down this deadly police-military exchange program. They're undergoing a lot of undertaking a lot of educational events, a lot of tablings, demonstrations, banner drops to this end. Also, Students for Justice in Palestine at Georgia and individual chapters at each university. GSU is restarting its own chapter this semester. And for the Athens, Georgia folks, we have Athens Against Apartheid as well. So now isn't the opportunity as well. If anybody has any for questions, comments, concerns, critiques, all that. Yeah.
Hello. Thank you so much for your presentation and for your clarity from which you spoke. It was thankful to get to hear from you all's experience. I was curious to ask if there is anything you could share that was an unexpected takeaway or realization you all had from your time in the West Bank, either something that challenged a previously held conception or illustrated something just wholly unexpected. That was the curiosity I had. Thank you.
I'll just project. I don't think. Is this hello? Hello? Oh, there we go. All right, sweet. Yeah, I think mine's on. Sorry. Yeah, no, I mean, definitely just seeing the, especially just the routine, like daily nature of it. Like many times, not just like daily, but like multiple times a day, like these farmers and these shepherds are having to deal with trespassers and people like coming to assault them literally 4 times an afternoon. It's ridiculous. They can't get work done. They can't have time for just everyday life. So it was very, very powerful, of course, to see that and to try and be present for that. One of the things that I found very, very interesting was that in talking with some of the Palestinian host families as well, they said, with you, we maybe get a few hours of sleep. With you here, we get, maybe a little bit of sleep, but without you, we get 0 sleep. So just that alone was like, I don't know, just really very powerful to see, I guess.
I was impressed with and humbled by the level of political organization in some of these towns and villages. I came home thinking, why am I not organizing with my neighbors? What is wrong with me? This is amazing, because so many decisions, whether or not to have internationals, how to do any of the kind of documentation and where it goes, all of that was made collectively in regular community meetings. And again, the level of political engagement, a much larger percentage of Palestinians know who the Speaker of the House is than Americans. I'm absolutely certain of that. And so it was truly humbling. And they were the ones who told me that Biden had dropped out of the race. They're like, oh, did you see? And we had this long conversation in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by goats, about a critique of the Democratic Party and how that related to a critique of Fatah. Like, no joke. Every taxi driver, it was, we can recreate that here. We have to, as a part of our solidarity with their struggle.
Hey there. So I really appreciate that one of ISM's pillars is that it is Palestinian-led and that the role of internationals is to be in solidarity. I'm curious if you could give some examples of just what that looks like on a daily basis.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, that was something that kind of stood out to me actually last year when I first heard about ISM at last year's book fair, funny enough, was that it was in fact Palestinian-led. And what that kind of looks like on a day-to-day basis is that you have, of course, at least one local community coordinator in each community that determines where internationals are needed most, where activists are needed most. And then following the family's lead is also just a very big part of the work as well. Like if they want you to stay behind and just document from afar, if they want you to get a little bit closer, not intervene or create confrontation, of course, but to very much try to stop them from entering the home or trying to prevent them from going into the garden or field to get at the crops. So that was, yeah.
I was also, frankly, pretty surprised that ISM means it, because we know so frequently led by blah, 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 and that's not true when you get in the spaces. The spaces are white dominated, and especially because there's so much difference with respect to power with passports, with your papers in these situations. I was really surprised that we meant it. And there's an extensive process of training that pulls out the saviorism that some people bring to the space. Like, oh, the poor brown unfortunates is a theme when some people come in, even though their intentions are really good. You have to take that out of your head so that you can actually listen. And so if that means you don't say something to a settler, that's what it means. And if it means that you pull down a fence, that's what it means. If it means you risk arrest, that's what it means. And that kind of pillar was really present. Again, I was super surprised. An example of that I wanted to clarify is the principle of nonviolence. So that was at the behest of the communities that helped to found ISM. And so it is not an abstract principle, it is not Gandhi. It is instead that they feel this is the strategy that is most important, and every ISM member agrees to it, not, again, as a moral principle, but as a strategic imperative in order to maintain being Palestinian-led.
Hi, I have a question. If you could elaborate on, I know you said one of the essential reasons that you were there was for documentation. Can you elaborate on where that documentation is at and how they utilize that? And my second part of my question was, do you guys provide resources, like tangible resources in this specific organization to the communities as well?
Sure. So there are networks of lawyers who are capable of practicing in 48, who are part of both individual families trying to get the documentation that they need to prove that they own the land, because of course that's withheld by the courts because they don't want to acknowledge it, right? So you have a deed from before 48, that's invalid. You can show it to the cops as much as you want. You have to go through a process of getting a new one issued. And so there are networks of lawyers that do that. And the documentation is partially for that purpose. Also, there's documentation that goes to lawyers about families' persecution by settlers for people who've been taken and are still in detention. And so trying to get your family members out of an Israeli jail is a huge portion. And international solidarity. So we've seen some pretty profound movements all across the world, the flotilla being just kind of the tip of the iceberg. And that comes from people shining a light on what's happening. There was this incredible sense of, I'm so glad you're here, from all of our host families, because we take that struggle home. And one of the ISM kind of mottos is that a third of the work is done there and 2/3 is done here. And so this is part of the mission of ISM, is raising awareness about the actual texture of living under occupation. Oh, resources? Wait. Oh, yeah, resources. So the families who host us feed us. Like if you spend a week at Durit documenting settler incursions, you get fed, and fed really, really well. Masafriyata bread, there's nothing like it in the world. So we provide the resources to make sure that that's equitable, because you bring food in order to deal with the fact that we're an additional burden in some ways. We can be useful, but we're also a burden.
Yep, thank you for your question. I think that pretty much well answered it as well. One of the founders of the ISM also is Hueda Araf, who herself is a human rights lawyer and was in a couple of the last freedom flotillas as well. Just underscoring again that there's this network of human rights lawyers that we work with to try and get, restraining orders against these settlers for the families, that sort of thing.
Hi, so I had a question. So I've noticed so many of the people that are, supportive of pro-Palestinian movements are themselves minorities here in the States. And as far as going to the West Bank, I do wonder how many of us that are more in jeopardy here. What can we do? Who would you recommend safely be able to travel to the West Bank and actually do the projects that you're talking about? Would love to know and if you are a minority, or if you're trans, or issues with that, what are the hoops you have to jump through? Yeah, I'm just wondering about that.
We are just beginning to encounter the Israeli reaction, or the reaction in the border crossings into 48 of X's on passports. We have tons of non-binary and trans volunteers. imagine it's kind of disproportionate, actually, as you mentioned. And so lots of people do get in, but it is absolutely true that there, as here, folks face additional harassment. And there are sometimes issues with even crossing in from Jordan or arriving in Tel Aviv. We do extensive training to prepare people for that process. And again, we have lots and lots of successes, but it's there's no hiding it, there's no stepping around it, it is harder.
Hi there. You had mentioned about the onboarding process for the protective presence, that there was an element of like removing the savior complex from people. And also you just had mentioned training to prepare people for the differences that they would experience. Could you both speak more to like some of the details of y'all's onboarding process to get involved with this project?
Again, the beginning is an online orientation that's about an hour long, and then additionally is it a 2 hour, 4 hour, 2 hour? There's actually a break right now. Okay, gotcha. But an additional online training as well that specifically like talks about those kinds of things, about resisting the white savior complex, about again, like our work being solidarity driven, and about, again, like envisioning like why we're there, what we're doing there, as opposed to what we are doing for the people. It's looking at it more mutually. I guess you could go ahead.
Yeah, we're in the process of revamping all of our trainings. We have extensive online training when you're still in your home country. We offer that in multiple different languages as well, because it truly is an international solidarity movement. And then there's also an on-the-ground training. We try to focus on small group discussion in order for people to go through the realization of frankly, the crap that is in their heads. Like you don't know it. You don't know that you don't know it until you encounter it. We also try to use scenarios that may be unexpected. I was a relatively experienced activist before I went and thought I knew what doing, like having tear gas or cops on horses, or I thought I knew that right over there in Woodruff Park, Joy Davis Park. I thought I was prepared, and I wasn't at all. And so the scenarios were really important for me to realize that I was coming to this totally green and open and learning, and with a great deal of humility about who is going to teach me. There's a family with 7 kids, the oldest at 13, and they walked me through so much. They were the reason that I was effective, and I'm eternally grateful to them.
Thank you for the question and also the answer.
Hello. First, thank you so much for doing this presentation. I kind of want to ask, how do you mentally cope when you come back? Because just seeing these photos, like I can't imagine having to be there in person and having to experience that. And like seeing everything online, especially on social media, like I'll go on Instagram and I'll see so many videos of this happening. And sometimes it's very like, it weighs you down. So I can't imagine seeing it in person. So how do you mentally like deal after coming back?
Okay. I guess I was most recent. I did come back. They don't recommend this. I came back 2 days before GSU's next semester started. I wanted to get as much time in as possible. So there was a very little adjustment period, and then back to just business as normal, which I think for me worked pretty well. Some people, of course, just need more time to just adjust back to everyday life in the States, of course. Truly, meditation helped a lot, just sitting both there in the West Bank and back here, just getting my thoughts in order, getting used to, again, just like a very different reality where you can take a shower at any point, you can go to the groceries down the road, and don't have to deal with like a settler checkpoint. And yeah, so I would say that the ISM also has very good resources. Oh, and to go back to the for trans and non-binary as well as BIPOC volunteers, there are very good support groups and people that you can get in contact with for all sorts of resources as far as that goes, and reintegration back to the States and all that.
Yeah, we have a debrief that every volunteer goes through when they return, and that debrief helps them do what helped me, which is plug into ongoing work. So I had been involved in local Palestine organizing for a very long time, but the shared experience of being there is profound. Like, you mentioned a grocery store, and I felt vaguely nauseous the first time I got back into our grocery stores because there's so much. It's everywhere, and it was a little terrifying, actually. Like, what planet am I on? And so reaching out to other ISM volunteers is an important component of that, but also the activity. So when it's 24/7 there, coming back and not doing anything would really mess you up. And so plugging in back here, like last year, shortly after I got back, I gave a talk. And also, we might be starting an Atlanta ISM because we have enough body of former volunteers that we can begin to have meetings and begin to, provide that support.
Hi. I think I heard you say something earlier, like, why am I not organizing with my neighbors? And, I've been sitting there kind of working that through the flow chart myself. I don't know. I think like politics is a non-starter, even if we had probably similar, opinions. That's just, something that doesn't really pertain. And nobody really likes the cops in my neighborhood because really the thing that really though, it's like recently I can't get past kind of the realization that most of the solidarity I have is along kind of lines of drugs, which, I've heard the Sojourner Truth interview with Rick Ross, I know why that is, right? Because the government flooded communities with drugs for that purpose. And I don't know. So, and then there's always cop watching, but that's just, okay, a cop shows up. It's dependent on a highly selective situation or whatever.
Or ice watching.
Yeah. And then but then I also heard something about art and stickers, and I'm like, okay, oh man, I could buy so many stickers, right? I could do stickers and art and put them places and things like that. I don't know, but I'm not really sure how to organize with my neighbors, but I'm pretty sure we wouldn't call the cops on each other. But anyway, I guess I don't know if there's a question in there, but just kind of like to bring home solidarity in my life is still an open question, and whatever you got with that.
Yeah, we should touch base afterwards because we might be in the same neighborhood. So if you want to make a few closing comments or comment on that, and then we can wrap it up because I know that we should end soon.
Yeah, obviously, finding common ground, talking with neighbors sometimes is very difficult. I don't even know a couple of my own neighbors, but it's essential to building community where you are, of course. Maybe that's a bit of a truism, but truly, getting to know your neighbors, and the people that you go to work with, go to school with. It's essential to be able to talk about these things, and it's to some degree with the people that we go through life with. I don't know. Yeah.
A screening of No Other Land in your house. Hand out flyers in your friends and your neighbors' mailboxes. And I'll just try to close up on this. Do you want to? Okay. I really, really appreciate that you all are here, that you feel called to do something about this absolute crisis. And I want to just plant in your mind again that this conversation is about a political project that is dispossessing and murdering, this is genocide, murdering an indigenous population. And that we in the United States whether we recognize it or not, know a thing or two about this particular type of project. So as much as we are strongly in support and solidarity with Palestine, we also have our own mission here of freeing our land from the kind of oppression and ongoing state murder that we see everywhere. So thank you.
Thank you.